We are live on YouTube and on Shaw.
Okay, Council. Welcome, bienvenue en ligne. I'd like to thank our media and broadcast partners who are covering tonight's meeting. I'd like to begin by acknowledging with respect that we are in Robinson Huron Treaty Territory and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and known as Bawating. Bawating is home to Garden River First Nation, Batchewana First Nation, and the historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council. Before we go into the adoption of minutes, Councillor Vezo-Allen would like to make a few comments.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I just want to remind everyone and invite all of my colleagues on council as well as the community for the International Overdose Awareness Day, which is this Thursday, the 31st of August, courtesy of Save Our Young Adults. Soya is instrumental in coordinating this. It will start at the Memorial Wall, and I want to give credit to our past mayor and Lisa Bell from the mayor's office that worked with Soya and city staff to make this happen. So 5 o'clock, meet at the wall. Then there'll be a free event under the Bondar Pavilion afterward. So I welcome the entire community, everyone. We all need to come together and support those that have been affected by substance use disorder. And I just want to congratulate the time and efforts and commitment of Soya and all of their volunteers. So thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Under agenda item 2, the motion by Councillors Caputo and Hollingsworth resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of July 31, 2023 be approved.
All in favor? Motion carries.
And under agenda item 4, declaration of pecuniary interest, Mayor Shoemaker has declared with respect to the planning application at 207 Old Garden River Road as the applicant is a client of his law firm. And Councillor Hollingsworth has declared on the same matter as the applicant is a family member. I don't have any other declarations.
Any other declarations, Council? Seeing none.
And I have a motion by Councillors Caputo and Spina resolved that the agenda for August 28, 2023 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Motion carries.
So that will take us to planning. Agenda item 9.6.1 is application AH23Z 534 3rd Line East. I have a motion by Councillors Caputo and Hollingsworth. Resolved that the report of the junior planner dated August 28, 2023 concerning zoning bylaw amendment application AH23Z be received and that council approve the application as follows. Rezone the subject property from rural area zone to medium industrial zone with a special exception to permit the use of road transportation and warehousing only and accessory uses thereto, and deem the subject property an area of site plan control, and that the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the same.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll turn it over to our Director of Planning if he has gotten a brief précis of the application.
Thank you, Mayor Shoemaker. The subject property is located on the north side of 3rd Line. It's about 300 meters west of its intersection with Great Northern Road. The recommendation is to rezone the property to permit the proposed trucking yard use only, subject to site plan control. And this is primarily for stormwater management and buffering purposes. And Mr. Lepore is at the microphone to speak to this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tenazzo. Welcome to council, Mr. Lepore.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having me this evening.
You are acting on behalf of the applicant, I believe.
That's correct. I act for Reghold Corporation, the applicant in this matter. As Mr. Tenazzo described, the application is to permit a trucking maintenance shop and equipment holding transfer yard. And so the current zoning's rural area. We are seeking to rezone the property to a medium industrial zone. I should note that the official plan designation of this property is industrial already. And so the zoning and my is really consistent with what the city's already determined that property should be used for in terms of the official plan. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address those.
Council, are there questions of the Director of Planning or of Mr. Lepore? Okay, are there parties here who wish to speak in favor of this application? Are there parties here who wish to speak in opposition to it? Or who wish to make other comments? Yes, yeah. And if we could just get your name and address, please.
Definitely. Mayor Matthew Shoemaker, members of City Council, good evening. Thank you. My name is Barbara Perry. I'm a favor to Mr. Tenazzo, who I do welcome. I'm at 588 Third Line East. As stated in our, I'm getting the terminology right, in our official plan, our property is to be industrial. Well, right now I'm still residential and I'm not leaving. So there are about 5 homes in the area that are residential. To let you know, the past, the neighbor behind me, Petro, who built their industrial, they are fabulous neighbors. They have been, I had a lot of concerns. They've been wonderful. I applaud the city in working with them so that they would meet terms that we could get along quite well. Even when their fence, they had, I guess, issues 4 years ago, fence go down one end, they fixed it. So very pleased. And I imagine that it will be the same with Mr. Tenazzo. As a resident, I have to say a lot of my concerns were addressed. I sent a long letter after we met. And my big thing is the fence. So I want from City Council assurance, or Mr. Tenazzo, I'm not sure how I address it, that the fence that separates my property, my neighbor's property will be built. So one, I need that confirmation. So I'm going to wait for that response. Then I have one more question.
If you could ask your questions, it's council will have to ask the questions of our staff directly. So if you can go through what you'd like to say, then we.
So number one, confirmation that the fence will be built and it's supposed to be a 2.4 meter fence. I think it's a fence with ditch and then trees. Secondly, what I'd like to know is the timeline. Is the fence going to be built prior to the development, during the development, or immediately after? That was a sticking point in the other component when I worked with Petro. They didn't build the fence a long time after. It caused a lot of issues with dust, etc. I live alone. Privacy is a big concern for me. Safety, I don't like people viewing in. Even with some trees there, I do get nervous. So my question is, assurance fence will be built and the timeline.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, are there questions for the planning director based on those comments? And I believe we've got, just before we get to you, Councillor Spina, additional neighbors who wish to make comment. And if we get your name and address.
Sure. My name's Pete Luzinski and I live at 572 Third Line East. So I'm this property for Regis behind me. I just got a couple of concerns. One, the fence is going up according to the plan. That's what I see there. It does mention a temporary ditch. So plan, where's the plan ditch going? Just a temporary ditch.
Okay. If you list out your concerns, then council can decide if they wish to ask the applicant or staff about.
So I guess the one thing is where's the permanent ditch going to be?
Okay.
And my second question, when it started with the tree removal, they came onto the property of us because the fence was in the wrong spot. It was put on 20 feet on the west side boundary. It was on our property and it was on the right spot, 300 feet the other. So came down with the machinery, they started taking mature trees out. And now the property stake is gone. And I went to look for it yesterday, find it. So they removed a lot of mature trees, even though now we see in the plan, I believe it's 10 meter buffer zone or something. all those trees are gone now. So what's going to happen to replace our trees, A, that were on our property, and two, that were in the buffer zone?
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other, and is that, we'll have council ask questions in a moment, but.
Yeah, well, there was one other one, sorry.
Okay.
Lighting, what kind of lighting's property? And are we gonna see it in our faces now as we do from TMS trucks? Just shining in our houses, windows in my bathroom.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other members of the public who wish to speak or make comment on this application? Thank you. Council, questions arising from those representations? Councillor Spina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't mind asking you a few questions on behalf of the public who are here. Probably Mr. Tenazzo or perhaps Mr. Lepore. The first question was regarding when the fence that will be built and when it will be built. Do we understand or know when that will be built?
If I may, Mr. The property will be subject to site plan control. If the city requires the fence to be built ahead of time, it will be built ahead of time. It's not going to make a difference to my client as to when it will be built. If that's an issue that the city deems necessary, then it will be built ahead of time. That's not an issue for us.
I would imagine you would have to wait until most construction was done to build the fence.
Well, at the very least, we need a site plan. At this point, that this is quite preliminary. We're only dealing with the rezoning at this point.
Right. Thank you. There was another question about temporary ditching and where that would be and if there would be permanent ditching. And I don't know if that, Mr. Tenazzo, would you know, is that something that has already gone in the site plan?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Spina. So the plan does show the temporary ditches that currently exists. As Mr. Lepore noted, we are recommending that the property be subject to site plan control for buffering, i.e. the fence and stormwater management purposes. I'd want to wait to hear from a consultant to see exactly where that ditch is going to go in relation to the fence. And then the consultant would also speak to the most efficient timing of the fence, but ultimately there would be no occupancy permit until such time that the site plan is satisfied, and that would include the fence.
Right. So essentially right now, it's pretty premature to get some of the final answers on these things because it's still really in the infancy of the project. Right now, we're just dealing with rezoning.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to a point, there is a concept that's on paper, and we certainly know that there's going to be a drainage ditch and a fence along the, between the, along the sort of residential industrial interface. We don't know exactly how far back from the lot line or whether that's going to be on the lot line and where that's going to be in relation to the ditch, but we know that they're both going to exist.
Right. And I would imagine that for lighting mitigation and things like that, that would be shining to neighbors. It's much along the same lines. We have to wait for things to develop there. Is there an opportunity for the neighbors to stay connected with the building division or the planning department just in order to get some of those answers as they're coming?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can certainly stay connected with the neighbors. Absolutely. And I would note that on the lighting piece, we do have a general clause and we require where commercial or industrial lighting is going in a residential area, we do require a review to make sure that there's no undue glare. That's not to say that, I think the neighbors will see the light as it shines down and illuminates an area, but the theory is that there won't be light shining directly from the light source into a neighbor's yard or window.
Right. Perfect. Thank you. And the last question, I think for Mr. Lepore, if in fact it's found that there were some mature trees that were removed, is there something that will be done to replace those or figure something out there to solve that issue?
I'm sure Mr. Bernard would be willing to have that conversation. I will note for council that attached to the report, our client did undertake a sound study to determine, at least in terms of noise and that kind of thing, whether those concerns are being addressed. And so we're taking the concerns of the neighbors quite seriously. Like, we want to be good neighbors. Mr. Bernard's always been a good neighbor. He's been in business for a long time. So there's no intention to shirk from those responsibilities.
Thank you. And just a comment, it sounds like that what you're saying is absolutely true. The neighbors are coming here speaking highly of this particular neighbor and all of the work that's been done. So thank you for that. And thank you to your client for that. That's a good community citizen there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions? Okay. I will just note that the report does state that a fence will be installed on the property in the site plan control process as opposed to this rezoning, but it is there for our assurances. Thank you, Mr. Lepore. Thank you to the residents who have come and spoke today. All in favor of the motion? Carries. Mr. Caputo?
Under agenda item 9.6.2, application A923Z 207 Old Garden River Road. And both Mayor Shoemaker and Councillor Hollingsworth have declared conflicts with respect to this item. It's a motion by Councillors Zagordo and Spina. Resolved that the report of the junior planner dated August 28, 2023 concerning rezoning application A923Z be received and that council approve the application as follows. Rezone the northwest portion of the subject property located at 207 Old Garden River Road, defined as 72.8 meters of frontage along Old Garden River Road and a depth of 36.5 meters and shown on the attached map from single detached residential zone to low density residential zone with a special exception to reduce the required parking ratio of 1.25 to 1 space per dwelling unit, and that the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the same.
Okay, I will refer to Mr. Tanasso to give us a brief.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. The subject property is on the south side of Old Garden River Road. It's about 150 meters northeast of its intersection with Second Line. The applicant's rezoning the property to facilitate the construction of 4 semi-detached dwellings. That's a total of 8 dwelling units on the property. The application is to approve, or sorry, the recommendation is to approve the application. And Mr. Daniel Fremlin is here to speak to this application. Thank you.
Mr. Fremlin, if you want to head over to the microphone. Welcome to council. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just looking to rezone it for some up there. I did some on Johnson Avenue ago and there's a lot of good reception from it. So I'm gonna do the same thing up there and just looking for 4 semis for now, and the rest of the property I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with, but that's another matter for another day. That's
Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this development? Aside from Mr. Fremlin? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition of this development? Council, any questions on the development? There's no question. We'll go vote. All in favor? Motion carries.
Okay, council, that will bring us to one specific item that we've got on our agenda that we've got a delegation here for, which is 2022 financial audited financial statements 7.2, which we'll deal with before anything else. KPMG is our auditors and they are present if there are questions on agenda item 7.2. Councilors, questions? Councilor Bruni?
Question regarding the landfill site. I'm trying to pop it up here. Yes, to the auditor, KPMG. Should we be in a panic mode with our landfill site? It has reduced, of course, when you want it, you can't find it, but
I saw the reference you were talking about, Councilor Bruni. It was a reduction in the lifespan of the remaining lifespan of the landfill down to 5 years.
yeah, I got it right here now. So 2021, it was 5.3, and now we're down to 4.32. How concerned should we be as a city council for this?
Through you, your worship, just if I may, Council, that's probably a question that's better posed to your staff as opposed to the financial statement audit. What I would suggest though, Council, is this. We've had conversations with your staff concerning their plan to expand the landfill specifically, and I would suggest your staff are better suited to answer this. We do understand that there is a strategy underway to mine the landfill to basically create capacity on the existing site. We also understand that there has been some land that has been acquired for expansion as well. So I wouldn't necessarily use the term state panic. If I may, it seems to me, just from our own observations, that your staff are aware that the end of life is approaching and there are strategies in place to extend and to develop that capacity. So, you know, it's not really our place to say. Had your staff told us, yeah, we have no clue, Oscar, we're waiting for 4 years, that would obviously be a different answer. And I will leave it to your management team if they wanted to provide some clarification.
Thank you. Who would I direct it?
Our Director of Engineering can probably give us a fairly high level overview at this point.
Through Mr. Mayor to Council Bruni. So that would be a question that I think was answered at for the annual landfill report, which was a few meetings ago. I didn't have that on my radar to speak to tonight, but yeah, we were at 5 years in the last report. As Oscar mentioned, we are looking at other technologies and realizing different efficiencies and creating some capacity in the existing space. That's why the number doesn't always change by a year every year. It's kind of a moving target.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bruni. Anyone else with questions of KPMG? Or generally on the audited financial statements? Okay. Thank you to the folks from KPMG for attending tonight. That will bring us to
downtown security controls. The Downtown Association to speak on it as well. It's agenda item 9.2.1. And there's a motion by Councillors Zagordo and Hollingsworth resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services dated August 28, 2023 concerning downtown security patrols be received and City Council refer the expense to 2024 budget deliberations. Further, that City Council approve the utilization of up to $60,000 from the contingency reserve to support in-year implementation of security services for the remainder of 2023. And Nicholas Rossett, the chair of the Downtown Association, is in attendance as well.
welcome to council again, Mr. Rossett. Getting to be a regular here. You conducted a survey of your membership on downtown security patrols. You have provided us with the results, which are helpful. Thank you. I'll give you a couple minutes if you want to just go over those at a very high level.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council for having me back. The Downtown Association Board Council has met regarding the question of our involvement with security patrols. Our office has provided a letter of intent, which indicates that we are absolutely in favor of security patrols to assist in improving the safety and security downtown. We are also prepared to participate within our means with this program. We also asked our membership for input to help understand their needs. We are hoping this data can help in an RFP process with contractors to ensure concerns are met most efficiently. I have a short presentation with the results. Don't need to see it. I can just run you through it. It's pretty simple. Sure. Got it. All right, I'll just run you through it. It's pretty quick and simple. So throughout the survey, one of the questions was, do you feel that private security presence would add to the safety and security and enjoyment of downtown? 91% said yes. The 9% that said no were referring to their desire to have more police presence rather than a private security. So I think it was a pretty unanimous opinion that more authority, security is necessary. The other one that was a pretty good information was which do you consider the highest priority, being daytime, nighttime, or a mixture? We saw 58.9% would prefer a mixture of daytime and nighttime patrols. Areas of concern. This is one that I'm hoping helps drive that RFP process. The biggest concern was the homelessness and addictions at 41%. We understand that that's not always necessarily a security concern, but more of a social service type concern. But that might help in the RFP to decide what is being requested of the contractor. The other high ones were vandalism, theft, loitering, break and enters. Some. It was where the finances come from. We're happy with a mixture from our office and the city. Then we were asking a little bit about the Downtown Ambassador Program and the homelessness prevention and outreach team to see if everyone was aware of those programs. Those aren't programs from the Downtown Association, but we do endorse and try to promote those programs as they identify directly to the homelessness and addictions crisis that we're seeing, and those concerns are being expressed by the membership. So we're working at encouraging the membership to utilize those services in addition to what's being looked at here for safety and security. There were comments and things. I won't go through everything. Really, it's probably a lot of what you're expecting to hear. The one question is mostly to do with, is private security going to have the authority and reach necessary to address the seriousness of what we're seeing downtown? I think, again, that'll be a conversation with the contractor to ensure that those requests can be met. But the long and short of it is, we hear from our merchants, customers, and residents regularly that we are in dire need of help addressing the safety and security of the Sault downtown. In summary, the DTA is in full support to assist the City of Sault Ste. Marie implementing a security presence in the downtown. We would like to collaborate with city staff to help develop the parameters for the program to ensure that the concerns are met. And thank you very much for considering this initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Rossett. Councillor, are there questions of staff or the Downtown Association on the attached report? Councillor Bezuelen, and then Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thanks very much, Nick. I was just wondering in the survey or if the Downtown Association is aware of the Community Resource Center that's going to be opening up in the next few weeks, and the availability and programming that's going to be available there for our homelessness and those suffering from addiction. Was that incorporated? Like, are you aware that there's going to be a facility open, or did you consider that in your questions?
For you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezuelen, not so much in this particular survey. However, the Downtown Association is very well aware of that new facility opening up. We have had meetings with social services to discuss, how things are going to roll out and some of the rules surrounding any of the concerns you should be aware of. A lot of it came back to, relying on the Downtown Ambassador Program and that homelessness outreach team. Sounds like they've got a lot of plans in place. It sounds all positive, so we're hoping for the best there.
Okay, great. And just one comment, I do agree that definitely security will assist. And I like your idea that it needs to be a coordinated effort, and that those people doing the security work understand that there is the ambassadors to call and the homelessness prevention team. So I think the more information and resources we give people, then the better that we can serve our community. So thanks so much, Nick.
Thank you, Councillor Bezuelen. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I trust everyone can hear me. First of all, I just want to say thank you for doing this survey, Mr. Rossett. It's very helpful. You're doing an excellent job at representing the downtown merchants. So my first question is, in your report or in your presentation, you made a comment about more research from cities who are seeing successes. working with vulnerable populations. You mentioned that you would like to see some more basically research done. Can you just elaborate on that point? Have you heard or seen any other best practices that you want us to be aware of, that you want us to consider, and that other communities are working on?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. Just to be clear, that part was one of the comments that was received in the survey. Not something specifically that I brought up. However, I think it's a great idea. You know, we don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel if other communities have something that's working in place. I don't know that I've come across anything at this point that would be, you know, a complete step in another direction. You know, I think a combination of what we have, the Downtown Ambassadors Homelessness Outreach Team, and a safety and security presence, it's just another tool in the toolbox. They all should work in harmony together to achieve the same goal, maybe just with, you know, with different tactics. So that's why we're endorsing this request to go into a private security as well.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for clarifying. I wasn't sure if that was a comment or something that was from you. So thank you for clarifying it. That's all, and keep on giving us further your ideas. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have more of like a comment, maybe a question to, I'm not sure who will take this over if we decide to go ahead with it. But I just want to ensure that we are putting security in place to keep things like that. We're not putting security in place as you said, one of the main concerns was homelessness. I want to ensure that we're not putting this in place just to displace people. As we hear so often, homelessness is not a crime. So I would hope that we can work in tandem as we have discussed with the programs that are available and be able to make everyone feel a lot safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Caputo. Councillor Zagordo.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our presenter today. In your presentation, or as you mentioned, that there would be a willingness by the Downtown Association to contribute financially, yet in your survey, you know, almost 62% are looking at the city of Sault Ste. Marie only. So can you clarify that? Is there a willingness, or because this, or the survey itself kind of goes contrary to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Zagordo. That was a question in the survey to the membership, whether they felt all of the money should come from the city of Sault Ste. Marie, or if they'd like the DTA to participate in the funding of the program. The majority were in favor, and our board was in favor of supplying a letter of intent to indicate that we are. There was no specific request in terms of the financial consideration or otherwise. It was just worded if we would participate in the program. The answer is yes. If there's a specific ask, we could take that back to the board at that point and get approval for that. But we do have kind of a preliminary approval by our board to participate, including financially.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zagordo. Councillor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any questions for Mr. Rossett, just a couple comments about the homelessness aspect of downtown and safety and security. I just wanted to bring folks' attention to really the tens of millions of dollars that have been spent, especially in the last 2 years, in order to help support homeless folks in our community. As Councillor Vezo-Allen mentioned, we have the opening of the Community Resource Center, which to the best of our knowledge, is going to be the first shelter in Ontario that has a primary care physician located on site, which I think is great news for Sault Ste. Marie. In addition to that, there's a number of other smaller but no less impactful investments that have been made in increasing the availability of supportive housing in our community, which is ultimately the solution to this problem. And in addition, I don't have the exact amount, but there has been an allocation in the recent funding that the DSAB approved for our HPP plan that will go towards increasing downtown ambassador hours. So I know it's not the focus of this report, but there's an awful lot of good news for our community on the homelessness front. There's a lot of investments that are going to be opening and coming into service in the next few short months. I'm very supportive of doing the in-year funding for the security pilot. I believe that while we're opening those long-term investments, continuing to invest in the solutions, we need to also continue to support the folks, merchants and residents downtown with their feelings of safety and security as well. And I look forward to seeing more of the initiatives coming from Sault Ste. Marie Police in the fall too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dufour. Other councillors? I had a question probably for either Mr. Bear or the Commissioner of Finance. The 60,000 in-year funding that's proposed to be approved, is it the total amount we expect will be needed to run this till the end of the year? Or is it the amount less what we anticipate the Downtown Association might contribute?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, or to you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, that would be our estimate, given the total cost is about 110,000. We think that 60,000 would be the total amount. And then any contribution we get from the DTA would allow us to lower that amount.
Okay, perfect. So it's up to the maximum amount, dependent on what the Downtown Association contributes. Okay. And then with respect specifically to the place it's coming from, this contingency reserve, is it called? That's through or to the Commissioner of Finance, I believe that's a budgeted line item per year, is it not? The contingency amount, do we not budget 120,000 per year, if I recall correctly?
To you, Mr. It's a different fund. That's an annual allocation of 175 or 125, I forget off the top of my head. This is an actual contingency reserve that we do have. We don't use it very often. And in this case, it's probably the most realistic pool of funding to use for the in-year financing.
Okay. Right. Well, then we can, seeing no other questions, we can have a vote on the matter. All in favor? That carries unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossett. Just, I believe, to consent. Yes. So I had a request from Councillor Spina for item 7.4.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, no questions on this, but I wanted to make a quick comment on it. I know Mr. Lamming worked very hard on this motion that was brought forward for this. And I really want to highlight that the work that they did working with community partners and with the working group, I was able to chat with them for, a couple of times just to float some ideas. And I really want to highlight that this is the type of thing that happens when staff really has a focus on how do we get to yes. And, they found what some of the hurdles were, and they found every way possible to get around those hurdles and create what I think is going to be a very unique and incredible experience for people in our community and a very positive way to activate a lot of spaces that we have. So I really want to commend staff on taking the motion and understanding what the spirit of that motion was and finding a way to get to yes. And I think you guys did just an incredible job when you did this. And I really want to thank you for the hard work and the really fast work that you did on this. Great job. I can't wait to see how you guys get this done. So good work. Thank you.
Anyone else on 7.4? Councillor Segurdo? Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lamming. In your research, did any other community have a true tailgating event in the sense that it was in the parking lot of the actual event that was occurring? And if yes, these communities have similar concerns?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Soto, yes, we did do a lot of research work with the team in legal, and Mr. King here is here tonight, and they did canvass across the province through municipalities, and not any one municipality is currently doing a true tailgate event at a municipal facility that we're aware of. And Mr. King's here if you have questions on that aspect.
No, that's everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other councillors with items on the consent agenda? Councillor Caputo. I've got Councillor Hollingsworth after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some questions and comments on 7.12. Some questions for Mr. King.
Council, Mr. King.
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. King, can you explain the proposed changes to bylaw 2008-131 and why those changes are being brought forward?
Certainly, yeah. For you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Caputo, there's two proposed bylaw amendments before council tonight. One which is relevant to a parks bylaw. Essentially what we're trying to achieve through that change is that camping is prohibited in parks overnight. And there is a proposed amendment before you tonight that adds clarification to that. It was originally passed in the 80s. The language that's there through review and our consideration in legal, we feel that it lacks. And for that reason, we've proposed an amendment to that bylaw. Also, there's an amendment to the city streets bylaw, which is before you tonight for consideration, as it goes further than the wording that is there to make sure that city-owned land is protected from being foul numbered. And that's through legal review of language provided in section 9. It's reference to other city-owned land that certain provisions parts of that bylaw are in that section, but not in there's a bylaw. Perspective change consideration change.
Okay, so now with the street bylaw change, all municipal lands, including streets, lanes, anything municipally owned is going to be encompassed by this bylaw, should it pass?
Through you, Mayor to Councilor Caputo, that is the intention of this, that city-owned land and property not fouled or encumbered by debris, have you, so this can include a vacant owned city property that the city has best tax sale. The any way that the main lot.
Okay, so would these proposed bylaw changes only affect encampments, or would this encompass any and all homeless folks seeking shelter on municipal lands?
Through you, this to Council, I would guess that the intention here is to be consistent with the bylaws as originally passed, which is that city-owned property should not occupy in this one that is condoned or blessed. In this particular sense, countered situations where it's not that they have been fouled or encumbered by maybe neighbor properties beside, this land is close by, rubbish on it. We've also seen situations where individuals have extended their fences into parkland, trying to that property. Chickens located in one park and pens at one point in time, the bylaw to go in there. Removed as it is parkland. And this type of change in our bylaw is consistent with some recent case law that's shifted and discussed at possession. And there was one judge who kind of looked at these well in certain situations that don't want then instances. So back at that individual that had the chicken coop set up in the park, perhaps that could have been adversely possessed and taken by them if one more of those judges had decided.
Okay, so fences and chickens and all that, but this is potentially going to really affect homeless folks if the bylaw is passed as is.
Three of us, Councilor Caputo, I'd say the effect of the bylaw amendment has no change as it's currently worded. As currently worded, you're looking at an camping.
Okay.
This really what it does is it expands upon that and gives the enforcement individuals as well as the social services the ability to go in all hours of the day to see what activities are transpiring property better. So if it's start of an encampment in daytime hours, then maybe best to have staff, from Sabbath and service reasons or bylaw those hours to properly see what's going on in all services them as opposed to their now or show up during the day, start setting up.
Okay, thank you. I just have some comments. Is that okay? Okay, so I often hear that being homeless is not a crime, but the proposed bylaw changes do not reflect that. If this passes, the city will be directly contributing to the criminalization of homelessness. By deeming all municipal lands illegal to seek shelter on, the city would be either pushing homeless folks to private property, which would lead to trespassing charges, or pushing them further into obscurity in bushes or other hidden areas. Homeless folks use high visibility areas for safety. Being seen means it is more difficult for you to go missing in the human trafficking trade, be sexually assaulted, risk violence, or overdose alone, where it may take days for you to be found. With such a large percentage of the homeless population identifying as Indigenous, I am also concerned that these changes would contribute to an increase in the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls epidemic. If there was adequate shelter space and true and easy accessible transitional housing and permanent supportive housing to transition these folks to, I would support these changes. But without these resources being available, it is imperative that we shift our attention to creating and advocating for a system to end homelessness rather than enacting laws to try and police our way out of it. While I commend the tireless efforts of social service workers here in Sault Ste. Marie, there are simply not enough resources to be enacting laws to outlaw homelessness. For these reasons, I will not be supporting these bylaw amendments, and I would encourage my fellow councillors to take these points into consideration. While it is legal's job to protect the corporation of the city of Sault Ste. Marie and its assets, it is our job to consider the entire picture and protect all residents, including those who are struggling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Caputo. Councillor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if this question would go to Jeff or to Malcolm, but if either of them could comment, will the changes to this proposed bylaw result in any change to our current level of bylaw enforcement when it comes to homeless encampments in Sault Ste. Marie?
I'll give the first answer. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, not really. We have, as Mr. King has noted, the intent of the bylaws doesn't really change. There is clarifying language. I think what's getting lost somewhat in this discussion is the programming and outreach that does already occur for homelessness in the community. It is coordinated through DSAB staff and their homeless team. They have a number of outreach partners that they work with for homelessness. And it's actually the coordinated fashion is something that's looked on by other municipalities as a best practice. It's that court level of coordination is not seen in many other communities. Obviously, a lot of this is a protocol that's through DSAB and through the social services homeless team. So I can't speak to the granular details of it. What I can say is it's certainly part of the protocol that outreach and discussion and work in assisting people with finding shelter and services are always the main front ends and the initial actions on this. enforcement utilizing our bylaws is seen as a last resort effort.
Thanks for that. Just to add to that, are there any encampments currently up in Sault Ste. Marie right now that would then be dismantled by the police tomorrow as a result of this bylaw change?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Would it be accurate to say that the city's approach to encampments has been a more reactive base rather than a proactive one? So an example of a proactive approach to enforcement would be city officials, whether police or bylaw officers, going throughout city property, looking for anyone in intent to serve them an eviction notice? Or has it been more reactive in the sense of when something becomes a problem for a specific area, the city responds?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, in that context, I would describe it as a reactive action and process. And work of our bylaw enforcement and police is done with homelessness outreach. So we don't generally go in ourselves alone. We let the outreach activities occur. And if there are challenges in getting those services and outreach activities to a response that's going to assist those in those circumstances, then they would look to ask city bylaw and eventually police to attend. But it's not a first step.
Okay, thanks. And one last question, just in the interest of historical context for you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to you, Mr. CAO. When there was a homeless encampment set up in front of City Hall, was that encampment closed down as a result of enforcement of our previous bylaw?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, the ending of that particular protest, and it was more a protest, was really done through the activities of the social services outreach program and finding shelter for those that required it in that setting. Not all the people who were there or attending were truly homeless.
If I recall correctly, Mr. CAO, you spent a lot of time down there as well, speaking with folks.
Certainly, we, the then Mayor Provenzano and myself, usually 2 or 3 times a day, we're down there discussing, interacting. We recognize that homelessness is a problem in this community and elsewhere. And the solutions to the problem are through outreach, through social services, and through the other services that people who are experiencing homelessness require. It really isn't a type of response that you just need to get people housed or get them shelter. They often need more services than that, and that's the approach.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. That's all for my questions. I can go to my comments if that's how we're going to do things for process. So as the chair of the Social Services Board and the Ward 2 City Councillor, Ward 2 obviously is downtown, is typically the place where a lot of the homelessness issues in our community tend to crystallize. It's been the number one focus of my time on council. And for that reason, I can very confidently and assuredly say that we have done an extremely lot of work to get out ahead of this, because the solution to homelessness, it's not criminalization, but neither is it enabling the status quo. The status quo where we see encampments popping up across Ontario is a complete failure of all 3 levels of government in Canada. Instead of just talking about the right to housing that people have, we need to be talking about the right to healthcare and drug and mental health and addictions treatment that people have too. Fundamentally, if we are going to just talk about city bylaws in terms of a solution to stopping this crisis, we are going to miss the point. The point is that people need mental health and drug addiction treatment as well as affordable housing. Given our experience with previous encampments in Sault Ste. Marie and simply housing those people without adequate healthcare and mental health and addiction supports, it is not successful. Housing alone is not the solution. Space alone is not the solution for this problem. Our community is in desperate need of better paths to drug and mental health and addictions treatment. We need the concurrent day treatment program back. And we also need more supportive housing. Our DSAB board recently announced significant new investments in supportive housing for this year, and we plan to have many more for next year. If we were to embrace large-scale public encampments, we would be turning back the clock on our success on this file in Sault Ste. Marie, and we would be spending valuable public dollars addressing the symptom of the problem instead of the root cause. That's why I'm supportive of what I truly know to be housekeeping amendments to this bylaw, and why we'll continue to work tirelessly on advocating for more investment, going at the root causes of homelessness in our community. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dufour. Councillor Spina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions for Mr. King, please. So thank you for your report. What I didn't see, and I apologize, I couldn't find it. Can you tell me what were the changes from the original bylaw to this one? Is there specific wording that was changed?
Three of us to Council. Yeah, there was specific words that have changed in both the bylaw that weeks and probably not preoccupied with changing short title matters. Staff primarily the changes there. When you look at that, instead of simply adding to any street, the words or their land should have been in that paragraph. It's also been to repair. So in instance where somebody is to do rubbish or other items, as that example earlier, city property, those will enable the municipality law see that corrective action. Used to not have civil action. Even if on our property. So that's the change, language change. Bylaw amendment. And then with respect to the parks bylaw, there are three section 4, all of which reference camping parts of the city and prohibiting it. What this change does is, despite those and despite reference to signage, so there could be signs are allowed overnight. Simply if it's can't the language there.
Mr. King, if you could just speak a bit more closely into the microphone there.
Great,
thank you.
So the bylaw change there is essentially that despite the above or unless signed, contrary nor park shall be used for camping or living stations at any time. And that's to add clarity that, again, mentioned earlier, camping is prohibited in any park in the city overnight. This speaks to that not taking place at any given time, nor using it as a dwelling, which is consistent with other municipalities and bylaws that we've reviewed.
Thank you. And so those changes, what was the intent behind those changes when you were looking at those? Like, what was the spirit of that change?
Yes, we were tasked essentially with reviewing bylaws to make sure that they were in a good position should they be challenged in a court setting, yet by reason of somebody else using city property, as well as potentially encampments. And reviewing that language, we felt that it could be better worded to be clear to those individuals that potentially down the road that language needs to be used against And it was in that mindset that we made those changes. So essentially what we're looking at is stronger, clearer bylaw language should it be challenged.
Okay. And speaking of challenge, did you have a chance to review regional municipality of Waterloo versus persons unknown to be ascertained, that case law while you were looking at those challenges?
Correct. So the city's legal department, so I won't take credit, but myself and the city solicitor have worked quite extensively on this file, piece as well as other cases. This law in the city of Hamilton is one. Our practice also probably better. In that particular case, they had similarly stood challenge.
That's the Hamilton case? Okay. And of course, I'm sure while reviewing that, you probably had an opportunity to review section 7, charter section 7, sorry.
It's through Mayor to council. Familiar with the charter in section 7. Mr. Didn't do a detailed 40-page factum to submit on the base, but we did look at it, its application, and whether if challenged, these changes would fall short and be successful, or if the city would well positioned and make changes, and we feel that these changes are appropriate for the essential.
So in your opinion, the new proposed wording falls within section 7 of the charter and is consistent with the findings on the Waterloo case and the Hamilton case?
Say that, I guess, each through you, Mr. Mayor, speed at each case kind of turns on its own facts, but I think back to your
is there anything specific you can point to that you anything in this new wording that mitigates our risk as a community in breaching those decisions?
Through you, Mr. Speed, I think looking at the language as we've seen some weaker points that are in terms of how individuals may interpret the language. That reason we're felt the existing language was adequate. Wouldn't be before you tonight with it. That's why we're, despite the change having the same effect, language is kind of important.
So, and sorry, and I don't know if you would have seen this or not, but we did receive correspondence before the council meeting tonight. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Very briefly, yeah. Okay, so knowing that there are folks, and I believe some of them are in attendance, thank you for being here, everyone. Some are in attendance, and knowing that there are folks who have mentioned that they do intend to challenge this bylaw if passed. What are your thoughts on this potential success of the city to defend its position with the new wording? And, sorry, and I should clarify, I understand you're not a trier fact, you're just giving your best position.
Mr. Mayor, so look at that understanding that the bylaw remains. Change happens. There is you can't. Language is just adding. So if any strengthening it, strongly, success and challenge. Statement is essentially suggesting that despite bylaw passing or not, it's already a challenge. So to speak, is of the effect steam bylaws have.
Okay. And if this were to pass tonight, and if an encampment were then removed as a result of this bylaw being enforced, are you aware of any liabilities the city may have by displacing those individuals that may be there?
In terms of liability, suggesting successful and then for those costs.
Sorry, what I'm more referring to is the people, the individuals. So if we have individuals that are displaced as a result of enforcing this bylaw with nowhere to go, is the city now inheriting liability based on the wording of this bylaw and enforcement of this bylaw?
Mr. Speed, I could suggest that established by CAO. Someone, something locations or are they set up where? Let's put a city. See where the car. Say that with the language proposed. And here as to what. Position moving.
And I believe the CAO has something to add to that.
I'll just add to Mr. King's comments that through the way the protocol is worded and through the actions of outreach, there would be places to go. I did confirm that with social service on the question of downtown or homeless shelters having enough capacity. They did explain to me that while there's a certain bed capacity in the shelters, if it starts getting close to a limit, that social services will work with the particular shelter provider to add spaces for the length of time that it's needed. Whether that's physical things that they need to affect that, or whether that's some staffing assistance that they need to affect that, they will do that. They will also have look at non-shelter options if they need to accommodate those who are homeless at any particular point in time.
Thank you. So what it sounds like, and perhaps from Mr. King or Mr. CO, what it sounds like is enforcement of this bylaw would be, or the intention would be that the enforcement is a last resort, but helping the individuals is the primary focus of what partners and social services agencies would be asked to do with this.
It's three of us. It's the last.
Thank you.
Any comments, Councillor Spina, beyond those questions?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Venezuelan.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to actually Mr. Girardi. So Mr. Girardi and I last year coordinated quite a bit, including Councillor Dufour and social services with the encampment that was at the corner of Gore and Albert. So Mr. Girardi, do you want to perhaps go through your side of things from the public works perspective, having public works there daily? If you could describe that situation for me, that would be great.
Mr. Mayor, to Council Venezuelan, last year the process was slightly different, but we worked first of all with social services and police. Social services met on site at that particular event, and they worked with the people that were at the site. City police also attended, and we were brought in afterwards just to assist with potential assistance with moving and assistance with cleaning up the site afterwards. So our focus from a public works perspective is strictly to come in and assist with cleanup afterwards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Girardi. And I know that you coordinated with social services. So from your recollection, social services were on site daily, working with folks to find some solutions from your experience?
Through Mr. Mayor, Council Venezuelan, absolutely. It's worked very, very well. We haven't had any issues where we've had conflict on the site. So from my perspective, from Public Works, yes, it's been working very well.
Thank you. And just one question for you, Mr. King, just to be completely clear for everyone. With this bylaw as it regards to camping, no one will have a criminal charge if they're homeless and setting up a camp in a city-owned park. Is that correct? Thank you. I also just want to say in comments in terms of fouling and that sort of thing. Councillor Dufour and I have dealt with a lot of illegal snow dumping in laneways. That's been an issue. Parks, especially around Poplar, there's been some illegal snow dumping, as well as people getting rid of their lawn waste and garden waste and back alleyways, and then there becomes a rat issue. So I do appreciate that that's been added. And I just have a few comments, if that's okay, Mayor. So regarding the encampments and tent cities specifically for women and those really vulnerable. There was a study done because, as we know, in East Van, they've been dismantling the tent cities, especially in the Hastings neighborhood. So the Atira Women's Resource Society managed to speak to 68 people identifying as female. and 38% they said they were Indigenous. Of those surveyed, all 50% said that they've experienced violence, rape, and sexual assault of various problems living in tent encampments. So further to Councillor Dufour, no one wants to live in a tent, nor are we making it criminal. But after watching for a week at the corner of Gore and Albert, outreach teams were there daily. Joanne Pearson was there at 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. I was there. We had people that were afraid to go volunteer, to go to Soya to get resources. There was a sense of unrest for all of the neighbors in that area. And we had to take away the tables and chairs, which a lot of people in the neighborhood enjoyed. We'd see people there having coffee and having lunch and getting together, and that doesn't happen anymore. So I see this bylaw as a tool to get homeless outreach workers trying to get folks out of the encampment and into housing. And as DSAB has put a lot of investment in, we're bringing the community neighborhood center to light. There's going to be more shelter beds. There are emergency shelter. Every single one of those people at Gore and Albert were offered alternative housing, one accepted. And that's the other side of the issue, is why aren't they going into housing and what can we do? And there is so much more of a coordinated effort now between Canadian Mental Health Association, the Ambassador Program coming online, and our DSAB homelessness and housing team. So I don't see this as a negative. I see this as a positive so that we can move forward to help folks that are living in tents, because no one wants to be in that situation and it doesn't create a safe environment. I have a lady that lives on Edmonds and she won't go into her backyard, as Mr. Girardi knows, because people will live in her laneway and enter her backyard and she's living on her own. We want people to be able to go in their backyards, and we also want people to be living safe. So I support these bylaw changes, and I want to thank legal for investigating and giving us the tools that we need in our community to make it safe and to make sure that everyone has a safe and a happy, healthy environment to live in. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bezo-Allen. Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dufour asked a couple of the questions I was going to ask. I don't really have any questions, just a comment, and I'll try and be brief. I appreciate very much where Councillor was coming from and her perspective on this. What I was hoping in my comments and my questions was to kind of flesh out this issue a bit more, just for the public. But I think the conversation or the dialogue between Councillor Dufour and CAO White, spoke to the compassionate nature to which our community has been approaching this issue over the last few years. I know that in my work briefly with DSAB, sitting on their board, that we have a number of passionate advocates for both mental health, addiction, and homelessness here in the community. I didn't attend AMO this year, but I did in 2022. And I sat in a room, as I recall, with Councillor Dufour and Councillor Bezo-Allen and Mike Nadeau from the CEO of District Social Services Administration Board. And they spoke very clearly about the issues we were having in Sault Ste. Marie specifically, Northern Ontario writ large, outlined some innovative ways that they were addressing the issue and hoped to address the issue. And they're continuing to work in that space. Is there a lot of work to do? I think Mr. Dufour would tell you, we'd be the first person to tell you there is. But I am going to be supporting the change to this bylaw and hope, as everybody else in the province and the country does, that moving forward, all three levels of government continue to pursue this, but actually get to where we need to be on these issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gardy. Other councillors with questions or comments? I've got a couple. I think probably to you, well, either to you, Mr. King, or to you, CAO White. Can you outline the current protocol when a encampment is discovered, and specifically where in that process, do we factor in the wording of our bylaw in resolving that?
To you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'll just rush over it. As I said, this is a DSAP housing homeless protocol that they follow, but certainly when it's when one may be identified, the first point of contact is outreach workers. As I noted, there are several partner agencies involved. So they have a schedule of which nights which agency works. Social services homeless team does coordinate that and facilitate it. The outreach workers visit the sites and gather data and provide information to whichever local response leaders from the different agencies are required. And then they discuss certainly amongst themselves, the various agencies, specific things that may be needed for that. They then work with those who are at the site, participants, to with a view to getting them not only shelter, but the services that they specifically require. This can take some time. It's not a 1 day or 1 night occurrence. It often will take a while. Often they will need to build a relationship with the people at the site so that they are more accepting of receiving the services that they need. They will then work with either shelter providers or other avenues to ensure there are spots for people to go to. As far as enforcement comes, they will work initially with city bylaw first. It's a step less than police enforcement, just to educate the participants there as to why it's not a place for ongoing living and occupation. And they will continue to work with them at a last resort, or if there are indications that there are dangers to the people, either the people participants themselves or for the community that's right around that area, then police may get involved and sometimes be involved earlier in it. One fact that's perhaps lost a bit on this, when we have gatherings occur, like we saw in Gore Street, many of the participants in that gathering are not in fact homeless. They are there because of the activities that are going on at the time. So that they aren't necessarily homeless, but it does lead to a larger grouping of people and can evolve into problematic times.
And so you described a fairly lengthy process there that kind of ends with bylaw enforcement and or police enforcement if it gets to that point. So when the changes to this bylaw were drafted, and this is probably to you, Mr. King, was it with a view to ensuring that at the end stage of that process, our bylaw would hold up if it needed to be relied upon?
So, yes, that's correct.
And I believe in response to Councillor Spina's question, you confirmed that you reviewed the state of the law in terms of housing folks that are in encampments prior to enforcing the removal of them from city property.
So, Mr. City Solicitor and myself have on that.
And I trust that you believe, if you've drafted these amendments, that these amendments comply with the state of the law as it relates to removal of encampments from city-owned property.
That's correct. They felt short or
And in your review of the law, as it relates to the removal of encampments from city property, is one of the factors in determining whether or not removal of folks from city properties is constitutional, is one of the factors, the outreach steps that happen prior to enforcement.
So review of places, so Waterloo 7. Protocol is fact availability of housing is then if it does boil down. Precise what its intention is important. Why we have this.
Has legal also reviewed our protocol?
To yourself, right? Yes, legal department, city solicitor has been part of.
Okay. And I trust that if there were changes needed to that protocol, those would also be recommended for approval. Not to council, but recommended for approval because it's a protocol to administration.
Looking at the that.
To you, Mr. Mayor, the protocol is actually a DSAB protocol. So we are working with them, and I know legal has reviewed the protocol with a view to the decisions that were made. As Mr. King notes, having the protocol and following it are a very important part of dealing not only with the issue of homelessness, but as far as withstanding any challenges to how you're dealing with it.
Thank you. From my perspective, the steps we take before we enforce our bylaw, and I trust that this is simply just tidying up the language in the policy and isn't going in the bylaw, sorry, and isn't going to change how we deal with encampments. Tidying up the language to me makes perfect sense if we believe that our protocol is in line with the state of the law, in that we are ensuring that people who are in encampments have the outreach, have the availability of housing, and the availability of the wraparound services that they need specific to their circumstances to ensure that if they wish to go into housing, that the supports are there. And if they wish to go into housing with a view to their addictions issues or their previous mental health issues or their active mental health issues, that they have services available to them. If our legal department has reviewed that protocol and trusts that it covers the needs of the community, and that's really what we're concerned about, is covering the needs of our community members who are in need of those services. That is first and foremost, I think, for all of us. If that's been done and we are still unable to ensure that our city parks are accessible to families that want to use them, or our city laneways are accessible to, or the backyards of houses are accessible to people who live adjacent to city laneways, then we need to have this mechanism in place. I think it is a necessary last step, but it's clear to me that our staff, and from the coordinating between our staff and DSAB, there is an understanding that that ought to be the last step in enforcement. And so I think that this bylaw achieves that. It achieves the and the description of how it is enforced achieves what we all want to see, which is to ensure that folks who need it get the help that they need. And so for that reason, I'm going to support these changes and trust that if there are developments that need to be improved upon in terms of assisting those in need of assistance in our community, that those will be brought to us right away. So, seeing no other questions on the matter, we could hold a, Councillor Caputo wishes to remove her name as mover and seconder, or mover, sorry, from, I'm not sure if she's on the bylaws as well, but she's certainly on the report.
Yeah, there's not a resolution under 7.12 because there are the two bylaws, but I have accepted the two bylaws from consent.
And will we be able to find a new mover, Councillor Bruni?
So when we get to bylaws, I will read those separately, unless you want me to read them now.
Best no.
Okay. So I have a resolution by councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth resolved that bylaw 2023-145 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 2008-131 being a bylaw respecting streets and related matters be passed in open council this 28th day of August 2023.
All in favor? Any opposed? Carries.
And a motion by councillors Bruni and Hollingsworth resolved that bylaw 2023-146 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 80-128 being a bylaw for the use, regulation, protection, and government of the municipal parks in the city of Sault Ste. Marie be passed in open council this 28th day of August 2023.
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Okay, thank you, council.
And that will take us back to the consent.
On consent, I believe we were with you, Councillor Caputo. You no additional matters. Councillor Hollingsworth, you had a matter on consent.
Yes. 7.1, the correspondence with regards to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, I believe.
Yes.
First of all, I just want to appreciate that the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing is concerned about housing. We just talked about for the last half an hour and that the last council meeting. It's all very important to many of us, all of us around this council table. And I'm happy to see that the minister and our premier is working very hard to ensure and introduce municipal housing with regards to municipal housing pledges and targets. May I ask the question to you, your worship, for the viewers at home, I think just if you can just give one or two sentences to summarize how important this is. The letter was well written by the minister. However, I feel like if you just said in about 2 sentences what this means to our municipality and basically housing, I think it'd be very valuable for our viewers.
Yeah, thank you. And Councillor Hollingsworth, there's been a fair bit of media around this issue in the last several days since it was announced at the Association of Municipalities Ontario meeting last week. Cities of our size and cities in the range of our size have been granted additional legislative powers, provided that this housing pledge is committed to. Personally, I don't know that this is going to change anything in how our municipality operates. Practically speaking, we have had rezonings come before us in the 9 years that I've been on council and the 6-8 months that we've been here as a group, and every one of them we've approved. And so from a practical perspective, I don't think that the municipality is the one holding up development in our community. There is a funding pot that goes along with this housing pledge. There has not been much detail provided about how or if the pledge and the funding pot are linked to one another directly, but we have a housing affordability task force. Councillor Dufour, Councillor Caputo, and myself are on it, as well as a number of municipal staff that is going to determine what our municipal housing target is, and if that's in line with what the province wants us to hit, which is 1,500 homes in the next 7 or 8 years. And then we will determine, hopefully by then, we will have additional information on the funding that is available, the Build Faster Fund, I believe it's called. And we will determine what it takes to access those funds. Do not know that yet. And so there will be, from my understanding, a future council report on whether or not the pledge is specifically linked to the fund or whether or not you can access the fund without having to sign the pledge. Have I missed anything, Mr. CIO?
No, that sums it up as our current knowledge.
To your worship, just another question. Will you be replying back to this correspondence in any way? And the reason I ask that, again, I really believe in what the province is doing is an excellent idea. But my concern that I want to raise, and I know other municipalities are raising it as well, from a Phenom perspective, is that we have wonderful tradespeople in our community, from plumbers, electricians, to basically framers, to engineers, and so forth, that are working very hard at building houses here in our community. But we also know there is a shortage all across the province. And I would like to strongly say that if you do reply back to this letter, I would like you to think about emphasizing to our minister and premier that we can try our best to reach these targets, but if we don't have the trades, then we may not meet those targets right in 2031. Being in the construction business, this is a real concern. Our colleges are doing a good job in trying to fill these trade spots. But again, I really emphasize that we need to get the message back to the minister and premier that we need help, and the trades need help as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. I believe the housing affordability task force's target will factor that in much more in a much more in-depth way than the province's target does, because we have representatives of the local developer community on our task force. And we know our building industry. We as a municipality, I should say, know our building industry a lot better than I think you will find in the Queen's Park bureaucracy. Our target set by the Housing Affordability Task Force, which will likely be in the fall, October or so of this year, will much more clearly just dictate what is achievable and what we think is realistic for our municipality.
Okay, that's good news. Again, we just need to, again, like you said, educate Queen's Park. And I know our committee you just referred to will do an excellent job at that, but let's just keep hammering that home. And again, thank you to our tradespeople for building our houses. They are doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Anyone else on 7.1? Councillor Hollingsworth, any other items on consent?
I do 7.3, the Downtown Plaza launch update. I just want to make some positive comments. I want to basically echo staff's points in the report, thanking the community for all their generous contributions. I believe in the report it stated that there's been contributions of well over 1.2 million and funding from all levels of government. So again, I just want to say this particular project is not just council, but obviously many agencies, many other groups in our community have helped fund this. And I want to say also thank you to them.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Anyone else on 7.3? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Hollingsworth, any other items on consent?
Yes, 7.11, Canadian Pacific welcome sign on the Trunk Road agreement. I'm not sure who to send my question to, so maybe I'll just throw it out to Mr. White. The parcel of land that we are planning to lease once again and renew our agreement with is not a very large piece of land. In the past, have we considered or ever thought of buying that portion of land? Since the Canadian Pacific area really probably wouldn't use that small parcel of land. Have we ever considered just purchasing it?
You to Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I'm not sure that we have considered acquiring it. And I'm not sure, to be honest, that we could. it's probably a better arrangement to have a lease, but I'll let the assistant city solicitor speak to it as well.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, the intention is, and the initial intention was canvas with CP, and the desire was to enter into a lease, and that has been the consistent position since its outset. We did ask on renewal if there was an intention to renew or any other matter, and the lease actually was returned back in a much larger form and this more standard lease that they're entering into for areas of property. So they have taken the position to, again, have a lease in place.
Okay, just was curious, and I was also curious if they would even donate it, being such a small piece. If you have an opportunity to maybe nudge them on that, I think we should have that conversation, but that's all. Thank you.
Anyone else on 7.11? Seeing none. Councillor Hollingsworth, any other items on consent?
No, there is not. Thank you.
Councillor Dufour?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. 7.14 first, regulating snow dumps. So I believe this is a response to a resolution that was passed in 2018. In that original resolution, it discusses the stormwater management fee study and stormwater management plan. And I was just wondering if staff had any updated timeline on when we might be having kind of a more complete and fulsome conversation about the stormwater management fee study, or has that already come back? That'd be either through you to maybe Mr. Rumio.
Or through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour. That was a study that kind of ended a bit abruptly right when COVID broke out. And we have started some discussions earlier in the last couple of months about resurrecting that, getting back to where we were at and deciding which path forward to bring back to council.
Yeah, so I'm happy to go with the recommendations that staff have put in this report, but I do think it is properly part of a wider conversation about stormwater management across the whole city. And I think this forms a really great basis to hopefully have continued conversations in the months ahead as some of that stormwater stuff starts to come back to us. I think we'll be in a better position to kind of decide if there is incremental management approaches that we would like to take to this issue. But other than that, I'm good with the report. I just wanted to know stormwater management. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dufour. Anyone else on 7.14? That one, I would just, I think it largely echoes what Councillor Dufour is saying, but I think a first step, as a first step, it makes a lot of sense to look at the city snow dumps to determine whether or not we can capture some of the runoff, and I think they were called separators. I realize it's an expensive proposition, but in the long term, I think capturing some of that is better than having it flow into our stormwater system through the ditches. So that would be, it would be nice to see us go at some point in the future as part of a wider conversation, but understanding that we may not be there yet. Councillor Dufour, other items on consent?
1.3. More just a comment, Mr. Mayor. Really appreciate the really fulsome report on this. It's a really great example of city staff engaging in an appropriate level of consultation and really listening to the feedback that they were given. Thank you, Ms. Ricard, and anyone else on your team who worked at it. I agree with your recommendation, and I look forward to hopefully some more productive conversations with the MECP and some of these other specific companies in order to get the kind of behavior and compliance that we're looking for from some of our older zoned areas in Sault Ste. Marie. So thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Dufour, thank you very much.
Councillor Scott on 7.13.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Picard. I heard that these were well-attended events. I couldn't get to them, unfortunately, but many people did reach out, as I'm sure they reached out to Councillor Gardy regarding these. It mentions in the report that one stakeholder asked if we can consider a noise bylaw instead and some exemptions. And I'm sure those are things that you considered, when this first came. And are those even like feasible? Is that possible? I'm assuming there was some more information given at the event, but I'm just kind of wondering because that sounded pretty kind of like a solid compromise, right? Most of the complaints we're getting is about noise, and if it could allow them to still operate, relatively well, that might be a good solution.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Scott, there was a previous municipality that did use their noise bylaw, which was Hamilton. We did take that into consideration, and we will look into that as a potential option that maybe we consider that route. That's something we'll look into, given just the majority of the complaints are with respect to noise.
And then I think actually it might have been the same stakeholder mentioned a tiered approach. And that would make a lot of sense potentially as well, because I know that Councillor Gardy and I had somebody reach out where it was a small portion of their business, but they didn't want to have to fall under this for the small portion, right? So I don't know how we'd work that out, but that particular stakeholder had a lot of great ideas, and I'm kind of hoping that maybe we can use that direction. I think that would help the concerns of the residents as well as the concerns of the scrap metal facilities.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Scott, that's correct. That one stakeholder did have some great ideas. They're a well-known corporation that have had to apply for licenses throughout many municipalities. So they've been an avid resource to have and to have those discussions just to see what else they can, information they can provide to us. In terms of the tiered approach, that's something we can definitely consider. And that may just involve defining out the categories a little bit more in detail in any proposed licensing bylaw if we went in that route.
And regarding the exemptions, would that be something like, maybe I just need a little bit more clarification. Would that be something like saying, I'm expecting a large load of scrap metal to come in, in the evening, I'd apply for an exemption so that I'd be able to process it that night kind of thing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor to Councillor Scott, that's exactly what one of the stakeholders was suggesting, that they do get some shipping overnight and they wanted some exemptions to allow that. They're not necessarily crushing any metal at that time. They're just receiving some load. So they wanted an exception to be able to just bring that load into their facility.
And in those cases, would those just be, I'm not sure how many of the facilities have access to rail, but it would be like those facilities, or would it be something where trucks would be transporting it to, if we use the Carpent Beach, for example, would that be one of the areas that would be expecting to receive, 11 p.m. loads?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Scott, this was in regards to a different stakeholder, not Ames, and they were specifically talking about truckloads, not using any rail overnight.
All right. Thank you for that. Great report, as been stated. I look forward to seeing what we come back with. I know a lot of people in the community are interested in this, and it's only going to grow as the electric arc furnace becomes a reality. So thank you for that. And look forward to seeing what you bring back.
Through Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Scott.
Councillor Kinnick?
I just have comments.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so with this report coming back to council, I'm very glad to see that we're taking it as information. I think we do need to take this seriously, and it is a big step for the municipality or us as a city to require a licensing for this kind of business, considering that Algoma Steel is switching over to electric arc furnace, and primarily most of the steel coming in will be recycled steel now. So we do not want to do anything too quickly or too rash to impede our local supply of recycled steel. So I'm happy to see that it's going to information, and I look forward on more reports and how we can work with the community and with Algoma Steel and with the recycling companies to have a good business model and that works out for everybody, including the citizens, the businesses and one of our main factories in our city.
Thank you, Councillor Kinnick. Councillor Garrity.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I didn't attend the stakeholder session, but I did for the one for community members or residents. I just wanted to say, I know Mr. Rickard was there, Peter was there from planning, Tessa was there from comms, and a couple other people, I think, from planning. And it was a really good session. And I wanted to commend all of our staff who were in attendance for the conversations that they had and the concerns that they listened to so attentively and dialogued with the residents about. As mentioned in the report, it's a bit of a complicated file, this one, and I look forward to seeing what comes back and subsequently from staff. But I just wanted to point out the good work. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Garrity. Any other councillors with questions or comments on this item? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Ricard, for coming.
Thank you.
Councillor Dufour, any other items on consent? Thank you. Councillor Scott, any other items on consent? No. Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agenda item 7.6, traffic control at Northern Avenue West and Bainbridge. I guess it was just a simple request. The residents wanted to change the yield sign to a stop sign. We all know as drivers that most drivers, when it's a yield sign, will slow down but not come to a complete stop. And the stop sign, the vehicle would come to a complete stop. So the request was if we can change the yield sign, and Councillor Kinnick and I have spoken to some of the residents in the area. Simple request, change it from yield to a stop sign. And from there, I think everybody would be satisfied. In the report, it states that no collisions have occurred in 5 years. Sad to say, there was one collision that one vehicle took care of 2 houses. So, well, a stop sign, I can hear Mr. Girardi in the background. It's a simple request, change the yield sign to a stop sign, and I think everybody would be happy. And it's only 2 screws and a sign.
Is there a question there, Councillor?
The question is, we're requesting to change the yield sign to a stop sign. And in the report, it said that it doesn't warrant a yield sign. And we're just asking to put a stop sign there.
I think from a procedural perspective, Councillor Bruni, if you wanted the stop sign installed, that would be a motion directing that it be installed. We have debated a number of those over 8 years. The last one I think was on Texas or Indiana in that area. And our default has generally been to go with the recommendation of the traffic
All
engineer.
due respect, that was our request, was to put a stop sign there. And the report comes back that no changes are required according to the traffic consultant, I guess. But that's fine. I just want to raise the question or raise our concern with Councillor Kinnick that we were hoping that a stop sign would be more appropriate than a yield sign. Thanks.
I get the concern, Councillor Bruni. The one thing I took from the report is that there should be a change in traffic control at this intersection, but it would require some reworking of curbs and lines. So I do think that there's a safer way to manage this intersection, and it's something that I hope staff will put into our resurfacing projects or our miscellaneous construction projects in the next couple of years, because I take the intersection quite often, and it is awkward for traffic in the area.
Fair enough.
Councillor Kinnick, I think you have your hand up on this as well.
Yes, I do. Just for comments, because Councillor Bernardi took my question. Did the staff know about the collision with the car that hit a front porch and the side of a house there this winter.
That's Mr. Rumiel, sorry.
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Canuck. I did not author the report. I know that we do base these warrants on reported collisions, and it was not in our database of reported collisions through our traffic engineering software. So I can't speak to that. If Ms. McCauley actually was aware of it, I'll admit I wasn't.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Romero. Are those collisions only car to car and not car to property for those reports?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Connect, those would be reported collisions. I think vehicle to property would count.
Okay, thank you. Also, I just have some comments. While it is disappointing to see that we can't get a stop sign changed, I do like to see that engineering has put forward the mini roundabout. I think that would be very good in this area. It is kind of a wide, awkward intersection, like a triangle. Having that middle buffer, I think, would do a lot, because we have people going down the hill, up the hill, going too fast at that place. Putting in that obstacle would help people slow down, and it would really benefit the residents, not only on Northern Avenue, on Bainbridge as well, from all directions. So I hope in the future, when we are doing our resurfacing projects, if we do want to look at doing a trial mini roundabout, I believe this street and this residential area could really benefit from a project like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kinnick. Councillor Bruni, other items on consent? Thank you. Any other councillors with items on consent? Councillor Gardy.
Sorry, I'll be quick. 7.5, please. The grant agreement between the city and FCM for Emily.
Welcome to council, Ms. Cormier.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Emily. Emily, I just think it's important that the community knows about the grant and how it came about, dating back to last November. Would you mind just giving a quick high-level summary of the arrangement and what we're doing?
Sure. For you, Mr. Mayor. The City of Sault Ste. Marie applied to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, a GHG Pathways to Reduction funding program last year to conduct 6 deep energy audits of our top 6 emitting facilities. We were successful in acquiring that funding. Funding from the city also went towards this project from the city's Green Initiatives Fund. We got $200,000 from the funder and $50,000 from the city's Green Initiatives Fund. We've received the funding. We need to sign the grant agreement. We did put out an RFP, and we are reviewing the bids from applicants now and hoping to move forward with that project soon. The end result of the project provide us with a series of detailed deep energy and emission reduction measures for all 6 facilities, which will provide our municipality with a much needed roadmap to meet our net zero emissions reduction target by 2050.
Thanks. And Mr. Mayor, through you, finally, to Emily. Emily, what are I think you mentioned there were going to be 6 of our facilities or sites.
Yes.
Do you know what they are, or can you remind us of them, please?
Yes, the top 6 emitting facilities: the John Rhodes Community Center, the GFL Memorial Gardens, Public Works Administration, the Transit Administration, the East End Wastewater Treatment Plant, and Fire Hall 4.
Thanks very much, Emily. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gardy. Any other councillors with with questions about item 7.5? Councillor Dufour.
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, through you to Ms. Cormier. When the deep energy retrofit audits come back, will the results of the audit be expressed in terms of both our community and our corporate emissions? So like how much we can reduce and what that will be expressed as a percentage of our corporate and our community emissions targets?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour. Yes.
Great, thanks. Forward to it.
Any other councillors with questions on 7.5? Ms. Cormier? Councillor Gardy, any other items on consent? Any other councillors with items on consent? There's only two more. I had one, I think probably to you, Mr. CAO, or perhaps to the fire chief under 7.9. The upgrade in the 911 dispatch system, is it needed if there's a change to how we dispatch our emergency services, or if we change the structure of our dispatch system, would it be unwarranted?
Through you, or to you, Mr. Mayor, it is still required. The PA system is a system that gives real-time audio information to all the halls at the same time. We generally, in the case of a fire, all our fire halls will respond. Obviously, the closest one will get there first, but they all need to get that same information. And that is a need regardless of where the actual dispatch is coming from.
Okay. Thank you. That was my only question. We can have a vote on the consent agenda, Madam Clerk.
I have a motion by councillors Gordo and Spina, resolved that all items listed under date August 28, 2023, agenda item 7, consent agenda, be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
And that will take us to agenda item 9.3.1, request for reconsideration. Before we have the vote on whether to reconsider, we need a motion to waive the provisions of the procedure bylaw, which require a notice of motion. So I have a motion by councillors Zagordo and Vezo-Allen, resolved that the provisions of procedure bylaw 2023-100 requiring that a motion to reconsider shall be preceded by a notice of motion be suspended.
Council, I believe this needs to pass by 2/3 majority, so we'll not that matters necessarily, but I'll have to count your votes. So if you could hold your hands up for a second, all in favor? Okay, that is easy math. That carries unanimous. Any opposed? Sorry. Okay, well, it's one opposed. Councillor Kinnick.
Then I have a motion by councillors Zagordo and Vezo-Allen, whereas the vote on an alternative resolution considered at the July 31, 2023 council meeting was tied and therefore defeated. Now therefore be it resolved that the resolution be reconsidered.
Same thing here, council. If I could have you hold your hands up, all in favor? Okay, that carries from what I can tell, 8-2. Oh, any opposed? Sorry, I should have asked. Yeah, 2, 3.
There you are. Okay. So I have councillors Hollings, Spina and Kinnick voting in the negative and everyone else voting in the affirmative. So that passes. So the motion was a motion by councillors Dufour and Gardy, resolved that the report of the Director of Engineering dated July 31, 2023 concerning Queen Street value management opportunities be received, and that council, 1, approve in principle the conceptual redesign of Queen Street between Pym Street and Gore Street. 2, approve in principle the proposed reconstruction of Queen Street between at most Pym Street and Bruce Street to be included in the 5-year capital plan and be slated for reconstruction in 2024 at an estimated cost of no greater than $6 million to be presented for council's consideration at the August 28 City Council meeting. Further, if the $6 million proposed reconstruction cost of Pym Street to Bruce Street is insufficient for reconstruction of the proposed reconstruction area set out above, and if funding applications to assist in bringing the estimated reconstruction costs down to $6 million are not successful, that staff be directed to reduce the boundaries of the proposed area for reconstruction to fit within the $6 million budget for 2024. 3, direct that staff include the reconstruction of the remaining portions of Queen Street be included no sooner than every 2 years following the 2024 reconstruction area set out above. 4, direct that staff make application to every available funding pot available for downtown revitalization, whether provincially, federally, or through other organizations to offset the anticipated municipal costs for the reconstruction phases. And 5, approve the Spring Street conceptual redesign and direct staff to include the redesign in the 5-year capital plan in a year deemed most suitable by staff.
Council, I'm sure we've talked about this at length in the past meetings. So if there's new questions or comments, that would be great. Councillor Pezuelan.
I just have comments, and I just wanted to reiterate Diane Morales from the Accessibility Office, the concerns with Queen Street. And I am fortunate that when I can, walk as much as I can. And I walk up and down Queen Street all the time and do see, firsthand some of the issues. So her list was curb cuts. Many have been on the list for about 5 years, sunken and are heaved bricks, creating a hazard for small things with wheels. Rough, uneven sidewalks make for uncomfortable travel for small things with wheels. So this has been a big issue at the Accessibility Committee since I was elected in 2018, especially with a lot of our folks with the larger mobility devices that they don't have a choice. We're not talking about people with scooters that have some mobility. We're talking about people that don't have mobility. Need for consistency in how sidewalks are laid out. Currently, sidewalks are out of concrete and some of brick. Difficult for persons with vision loss to navigate safely. So it needs to be predictable when you're walking with a cane, when you have vision loss. And this has created some issues that we've heard from through Accessibility Committee. There's only one accessible pedestrian signal with audible chirps and beeps. Need for this on all corners for safe navigation. Tactile walking surface indicators. So those are those yellow they look like bubble wrap, but they're cement. For those of you that don't know, we need those. It helps, especially for people either if they're in a mobility device or if they have vision loss, to know that they're getting up to a crosswalk. There are currently no accessible on-street parking spaces. So our street was built, without those considerations, that wasn't required. So if you're coming out of a vehicle with a ramp to get onto the street, there's absolutely no accessible. So it does create for quite difficulty. And I've seen people trying to lug a wheelchair up a curb and that sort of thing. And if you're in one of those large wheelchairs that are motorized, that's extremely difficult. Need for guide dog relief areas for persons who navigate by use of a guide dog for persons with vision loss. So we're really talking about basic need infrastructure here, and I'm happy to be in person and without technical difficulties and support this today. But I just wanted to remind all of my colleagues, this is a quality of life and accessibility, not just where park benches and planters are going to go. This is really important. We do have an aging community. We have a lot of services that seniors and folks use downtown. I think this is really important. So thank you for the time, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vezuelan. Councillor Kinnick.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Rumiel. With the $6 million, which streets or which section of the downtown will be the first project for the remodeling?
You're Ms. Mayor to Councillor Canuck. So that would be Bruce to east. And if that was greater than 6 million, obviously we would refine those limits, but it would be the middle section.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor, is that all, Councillor Kinnick?
Yes, that's everything. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. It's more just comments. I believe that definitely we need to spruce up the downtown. I'd just rather see it all done at once instead of pieces, but I can appreciate what we're trying to achieve here. What I was just want to suggest is that when we move forward, if this is passed tonight, just look at best practices, see what other WOW components other communities have implemented that will make us a little bit more attractive and unique, you know, such as like, we believe in the environment. We want to protect the environment. So why can't we see more fill your water bottle stations? So we prevent people walking around with plastic water bottles. And so wouldn't it be nice to see stations throughout Queen Street where you can fill up your own water bottle? Also maybe going with Councillor Caputo's idea of the apple trees, but have vegetable garden boxes throughout the downtown so people can help themselves to fresh vegetables and set up like a community garden that is all throughout Queen Street. Also, I want to see the broken parking meters fixed. There's so many inconsistent ones. Some work, some don't. Some people are using the app, which is wonderful. Some people can't use the app because of visual situations or because of arthritis or hand coordination. So let's keep that in mind as well. Going back to the accessibility idea, think about people that unfortunately can't use the app to pay for parking. We have to be aware of that. And also, we want to emphasize again safety. So I know we're going to increase our safety patrols and ambassador programs, which is fantastic. But other communities, and we always seem to refer to Traverse City, but they have the SOS button polls. So if someone doesn't have their cell phone and they feel uncomfortable or they're in trouble, they press a button and a blue light goes on and they get immediate attention. So that's another security piece that I think we should consider are the SOS buttons throughout the community of Queen Street. So the bottom line is we have a potential here to create a real wow factor. Look at best practices, look at Detroit, how they spruced up their downtown area and including more Muskoka chairs and community gardens, as I just alluded to. Please, please do so. And we can easily do it under a decent budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Any other councillors? Councillor Gardy.
Thanks. I'm hopeful that we're going to start down the path doing what needs to get done at Queen Street. And I think it's important that we focus on what needs to get done because there are things that need to get done, right? Like, so the lighting, we have been told, has to get done. It's not accessible to many people in our community. That has to get done. Aesthetically, just looking at, like, if you haven't gone for a walk and looked around Queen Street at the brickwork and the curbs, I'd be shocked if anybody around this table thought that it was even passable, quite frankly. Now, if I had my druthers, which I obviously don't, I would have spent the 18 million and got it done because we're going to do what we need to do over the course of a decade or so. And it's going to be a lot more expensive than $18 million when we're all said and done. And there were also, some ideas brought forward that were, a lot different, which I kind of respect, but they probably would have cost a lot more than $18 million, quite frankly, when you're changing the scope of the entire kind of street and what it does. So I really hope that a majority of this council votes to support this motion that was brought forward, in large part crafted by the mayor to get the downtown going in the direction we need it to go. I think if we focus on the infrastructure piece and realize that has to be revitalized, if you will, or renewed, a lot of the components that were brought forward can be added at a later date, the streetscaping. You can make something look pretty cool, and to use Councillor Hollingsworth's term of a wow factor, by adding elements after we deal with what needs to get done. So, like I said, I hope we're moving forward on this. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Gardy. Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I previously voted against this, and I would just like to say that tonight I am going to support it after a long car ride with Councillor Vezo-Allen and a lot of discussion about this topic. I am in favor of seeing improvements in the downtown. I do want to see more accessibility. And I'm excited to see what we can bring forward for the downtown. This being said, I do hope that we get some great partnerships from the merchants and that we are able to entice more folks who are going to spend more time downtown. So I just want to say it is okay to change your mind. I'm doing so, and so I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Caputo. Any other councillors? Okay, seeing none, we can have a vote on the matter. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries.
Just waiting. Solar.
He was-
There, so. Solar Kinnock and Solar Scott Boost. And the other 9 members of council in favor. That passes.
Thank you, council.
That brings us to 5-year capital transportation program. So motion by Councillor Segordo and Hollingsworth resolved that the report of the Director of Engineering dated August 28, 2023 concerning the 2024-2028 5-year transportation program be received and that council approved the 2020-28 programs. The engineering division proceed with any for the 2024 works, that staff procure consulting engineering services for projects not to be by in-house staff, and that the resurfacing of Great Northern Road between Third Line and Weigel Street be designated project for the city's application to the 2024 Connecting Link program be approved.
Councillor Hollingsworth, who's got questions on this?
Yes, thank you. This roads have always been my, how can I say it? My big piece that I believe and we always need to invest in and make sure our roads are well improved, not just resurfacing, but the infrastructure underneath the road. We have to remember both on top of the road and underneath. I've been preaching that for many years. So my first question is this: in this plan of updating roads, resurfacing, rebuilding roads and so forth, I feel we have an opportunity to reconfigure the roads to include best practices that other communities are using to slow down speeders. We talked about this before, but we know by past studies done that if you make a road a little narrower, more narrow, as we talked about the Queen Street, even by a few inches, psychologically people will slow down, and that is one method of controlling speeders. So my question is, I'm not sure if I should, I guess, Carl, direct this to Carl. In your plan, are you looking at best practices of what other communities are using to slow down speeders in your 5-year plan? And can you give us maybe 2 examples or 3 examples what that looks like?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hollingsworth, I think that would be more relevant question to the speed management task force, which we have ongoing meetings and initiatives, and council is updated a couple of times a year on those improvements that we plan. You'll see some things shortly in the budget, some requests for traffic calming and other speed management strategies. Such as, I guess, for examples, we are considering automated speed enforcement. Those would be obviously at strategic areas in the city on major arteries. Looking at other traffic calming measures, lines in the budget will be requested to implement some smaller things like additional speed humps or additional signage.
Okay. So, but do you not still think that there's opportunity here when you're resurfacing to maybe slightly change a curve, slightly change a road, to start implementing some of these possible speed task force ideas instead of waiting for the committee? Isn't there a possibility for your team to start maybe making some more roads narrow by a few inches or something?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth's changes in geometry through moving the curbs in or out, or changing the straightness of a road to be more curvilinear are definitely great ways to reduce speed. And those are strategies that are well documented and would be something that we'll look at in detailed design of where appropriate, if that, which we're not at that point right now in approving these conceptual plans.
True enough, we're not, but I just want to emphasize it as we move forward, not to lose the importance of speed. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much for your report, Carl. And I sent you this question, but I just wanted to bring it to light. So the working of the Drive Putney area isn't slated till 2028. And I know the folks in the Drive do have a lot of issues with the roads, especially when there's snow melt, that sort of thing, lots of big gutters. And just wondering if you could explain how you prioritize certain roads and schedule them, because the folks on the Drive have been asking for this since 2018, 2019. So I would like to be able to give them a thorough explanation as to the process and as to why. Thank you.
Sure. Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bezuwelen. So roads in the capital plan are prioritized on several factors. One is the pavement condition. So through our asset management plans, which are pretty new, we utilize the pavement condition index and sort of prioritize them first that way. Next, through road classification, obviously there's different priorities set to arterial roads, which move large amounts of traffic, then collectors, and then local roads like residential streets, which we do try to do a good amount of local roads in these plans. We consider underground infrastructure like storm and sanitary sewers. There's some roads that may not score as poorly on the surface, but have recurring sanitary sewer failure or water main breaks. We look at recommendations through environmental assessments. So road improvements, road extensions, road widenings through the environmental processes are programs that we have going on. And then the last one would be like special community areas, like the downtown, maybe treat a little different than other areas, like parks, like Bellevue Park, something that would maybe get a couple extra priority points.
So if the conditions were to worsen in the Drive area, would there then be an ability to sort of prioritize it on the list and not have it till 2028?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezuwelen, the good thing about the process that we're going forward with is that we're going to redo the 5-year capital plan every year. So every year, 1 year will fall off and then another year will be added. And there'll be the opportunity to reprioritize those areas that sort of deteriorate faster than maybe anticipated.
Okay, thank you very much, Carl.
Thank you, Councillor Bezuwelen. Councillor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Rumiel or Mr. Tanazo, I'm aware that through, I believe, our SDF funding, we were undertaking some studies of underground linear infrastructure that would identify pinch points for future housing densities and developments. Will the results of this study be able to be reflected in our future 5-year capital plans?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Dufour, the models, as you know, the model is not quite complete. We're at the calibration point in getting the model ready to be used for that very purpose. And again, through renewing our 5-year capital plan every year, we'll definitely look at pinch points in the sanitary system, and that would speak to what I mentioned earlier, that underground infrastructure is looked at too, and that would be considered a deficient area in that may help with the development of certain areas. And we could try to address those through capital plans.
Excellent, Carl. That's great news. Do we know, is this model expected to be ready in 2023 or early 2024?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Dufour, yeah, I believe we're shooting for it to be done before the staff expires, which is this year.
Excellent. That's great news. My other question I see here for 2024 Stanley Street, which got bumped from 2023. Are we able to prioritize that project in the queue for 2024 because it was bumped from 2023? In terms of time of the season.
Through you, Mr. Mayor to Councillor Dufour, are you asking that we make sure we don't bump it again?
Well, and that we issue the engineering and the design, like kind of in a priority sequence. Like if we can get this tender out sooner, then hypothetically we would see that project commence at an earlier point in the construction season.
Yeah, the great news with that project is we did design that one in-house and it is complete. We were ready to tender it. So that should be one of the very first ones to go because the drawings and contract specifications are all complete.
You're just full of good news for me tonight, aren't you? My last question for Lower Lake Street. Really glad to see this area there because of the proximity to Bellevue Park. I was just wondering if we know if the sidewalk and any bike facilities will go on the east or the west side.
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Dufour, again, this hasn't been gone through any design process. Our discussions with staff have been that we require a sidewalk on the park side.
Okay.
That's my initial thought is it would be on the west side.
Good to know. Thanks very much. That's all.
Councillor Dufour, Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question, Carl, regarding the recommendations from People's Road Drainage. I notice you have something in 2025, 2027, and 2028. We don't have anything in 2026.
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, those are placeholders. Again, these are future years, obviously, in the plan, and they may be reworked. And the next time you see this plan, you'll see actual projects identified there. Because as you know, we're in the environmental assessment stage, and we are aware that there are going to be some big recommendations for that drainage study. And it was just too early to those are really just placeholders. And the difficulty in it is in 2026, we are still trying to do that second year of Queen Street, and those are big numbers. So it's just sort of a balancing act right now. And I mean, the council will get another chance to speak to the Queen Street after seeing how phase one goes, and that could really change in the future depending on what the final recommendations for People's Road are and how much they are, and I would expect to see it a little bit different in the coming years.
So we might not see anything in 2025 for the People's Road drainage issue that we've had for the last 7 years, 6 years.
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you may see something in 2026 as well. It's just that those numbers, those project placeholders aren't published in this plan, but you saw them. The amounts that we had earmarked for each year, they're significant. It could be two smaller projects, one in 2025 and one in 2026. I don't know yet. Those are just basically placeholders to secure the annual funding from the program for recommendations we know are going to be substantial for that People's Road Drainage EA.
Thank you. I'm batting 0 for 2 tonight with Carl. It's
Luke was pretty happy with my answers.
Your seatmate's doing better. Any other councillors with questions on 9.3.3? Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramil, can you just outline for me and for any constituents who are wondering if you have a street that you are hoping that would be redone, how do we go about deciding on these? And is there a way that someone should go about reporting things if they would like to be on this list?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Caputo, that's a great question. It reminds me of a point I missed in outlining the prioritization to Councillor Vezo Allen, is that you could also petition for a local improvement. So you could reach out to the clerk's department. They could provide a petition package to the resident for a local improvement, which then they would take to their neighbors. That gets presented. An evaluation is done by the tax department, whether for sufficiency, and that's brought to council. And council can choose to prioritize that higher.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councilor Caputo. Anyone else with questions on this agenda item? Seeing none, we can have a vote on the matter. Favor? Any opposed? That carries.
To agenda item 9.7.1, the CAO recruitment consultant selection. And I have a motion by councillors Zagordo and Hollingsworth resolved that the report of Mayor Shoemaker dated August 28, 2023 concerning the recommended search consultant for the CAO selection process be received, and that City Council authorize the hiring of Feldman Daxon to assist in the recruitment of a new CAO at their listed fee of $33,000 plus HST.
Council, any questions on this matter? Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would address this to you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to you, Mr. Mayor. If the selected candidate doesn't work out in like, I don't know, 3-6 months, whatever it is, will, forgive me, I forget their name already, Feldman Daxon, replace said candidate for free?
Yes, there's a service guarantee in there. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to disclose the time frame of it, but it's longer than 6 months that they'll do a second search if the candidate who is recruited leaves for any reason. They'll do a search without an additional fee.
Good, good. And then I believe last time, so for Malcolm, we did it internally. We didn't use an outside consultant. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, prior to Malcolm, did we?
We did, 2015.
And what was the fee for that one?
30,200. I just went back and checked a short while ago. So this is relatively minor inflationary adjustment.
So this is probably cheaper then, right? If you include inflation, I would assume this is coming back.
I would say it's very competitive fee.
Great. That's all my questions. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Other councillors with questions on this agenda item? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? That carries unanimous.
Yes, to agenda item 10.1, which is a motion by councillors Kinnock and Scott. Whereas the city of Sault Ste. Marie recognizes the urgent need for physicians in Northern Ontario, as it is experiencing a shortage of trained physicians and specialist physicians. And whereas life expectancy of Northern residents is more than 2 years lower than the Ontario average, and that mental health and addictions are at a 4 times higher rate. And whereas 1 in 8 Northern residents does not have access to a family doctor, and many must travel long distances to access healthcare services, representing the failure of healthcare to so many in Northern Ontario. Whereas communities in Northern Ontario require access to equitable healthcare, especially underserved rural, Indigenous, and Francophone communities. And whereas the Northern Ontario School of Medicine University's current base funding rates have not been increased sufficiently to accommodate growth and expansion or recognition of the added costs stemming from the medical school becoming an independent university. Now, therefore, be it resolved that with the announcement of unprecedented medical expansion for the NOSM University's medical programs, the city of Sault Ste. Marie urges the provincial government to grant NOSM University's request for a permanent increase in annual base funding of $4 million before the end of the 2023-2024 fiscal year, so it can continue to deliver on the mandate that was originally established by this provincial government in response to the needs of Northern municipalities. Further, be it resolved that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Premier Doug Ford, Minister of Health, and Deputy Premier Sylvia Jones, Minister of Colleges and Universities Jill Dunlop, MPPs Greg Rickford, Vic Fideli, George Peary, Ross Romano, Kevin Holland, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Northern Ontario School of Medicine University, Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities, Northern Ontario Academic Medicine Association, and the leaders of the opposition parties of Ontario.
Council, I'll pass the mic to Councillor Kinnick and Councillor Scott momentarily, but this a motion that speaks to a significant need, not just in our community, but in communities of our neighbors across Northern Ontario. As a result of becoming an independent university, the first non-affiliated medical school in all of Canada, the Northern Ontario School of Medicine is staring down a significant budget shortfall. And evidence is that the Northern Ontario School of Medicine University graduates stay in Northern Ontario at a significantly higher rate than their peer schools that are south of the Barrie border or the North Bay border. So access to family physicians, access to specialists in our community will be significantly hampered if Northern Ontario School of Medicine University has to scale back their offerings or their internships or their placements, residencies because of a budgetary shortfall. So what we are asking the provincial government through this resolution, and hopefully this resolution will be passed by a number of our northern counterparts, is to recognize the additional costs that have come with being an independent school of medicine, unaffiliated with another university. That means they have to have their own library information system. That means they have to have their own registrar's office, things that previously were undertaken, physical plant, for example, that were undertaken by their host universities, those being Laurentian and Lakehead. So recognizing all that is this motion that asks the provincial government to fund the shortfall that has been identified through consultations, not just with the Provincial Ministry of Health and the Provincial Ministry of Colleges and Universities, but also Deloitte and independent third parties who have looked at the budget, said this is the amount that is needed to provide the same or better service than has been provided in the past and that we've come to expect from the Northern Ontario School of Medicine University. So an important issue for all of our communities, because without doctors, we can't do economic development, we can't do quality of life. They are one of the first things that businesses ask about when they come looking at Sault Ste. Marie as a place to do business. What's our power supply, which we've also got concerns with, and we've expressed those to the province last week. What's our availability of doctors? Those are important for the businesses. Those are important for their employees. So thanks to Councillor Kinnick and Scott for moving and seconding this. I'll pass the floor to Councillor Kinnick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to read some comments. So this is a very important issue. We cannot afford to ignore this issue. We must be supporting a Northern Ontario medical school. We are already hearing in the news almost weekly through the summer of emergency room closures all over Ontario. The group health center is releasing patients because they cannot replace retiring family doctors. 1 million new Canadians 1 million new Canadian residents this year in Canada have added to our population. Med schools are not growing class sizes with population growth. And also there was 140 resident spots this year left unfilled with the residency program. All these factors are leading to the issues we are seeing right now in Sault Ste. Marie and all over Canada. We as the city, who are supposed to be providing and looking out for our citizens, must address this issue at the municipal level to put pressure on provincial and federal governments to help take this problem seriously and come up with an actual solution, because if not, people are going to be dying. That is the bottom line. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kinnick. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Much like what Councillor Kinnick was saying, I agree with everything he was pointing out. Also, $4 million in the grand scheme of things, it's probably cheaper for the province to support than some of the other problems that may occur because of shortage. I know from personal experience, I have friends that attended NOSM and intend to stay in Northern Ontario. So you're absolutely correct. There's definitely people that attend and stay in the area. So yeah, I think that this is a good thing to start with the pressure on, and we need to keep our foot on the gas on this and do whatever we can to support doctors in the north.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Any other councillors, questions or comments on this? Seeing none, can I have a vote on the matter? All in favor? Any opposed? That carries unanimously.
To Councillors Zagordo and Hollingsworth resolved that all bylaws under item 12 of the agenda under date August 28, 2023, state and accept bylaws 2023-145 and 2023-146 be approved.
All in favor? That carries.
And I have a motion by Councillors Caputo and Hollingsworth that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? That carries. Council?